is all about making decisions. What should I have for lunch? What job should I get? Some decisions are choices between right and wrong. Should I gossip? Should I give money to someone on the street? Should I steal this if no one is looking? Choices between right and wrong are known as ethical decisions, and they require more thinking about than just everyday, ordinary decisions. When we're faced with an ethical choice between good and bad, right and wrong, there are all sorts of things that influence the decision that we're about to make. We might be influenced by the consequences of that decision. Am I going to get into trouble if I get found out? Friendships might influence us in how to make a decision between right and wrong. We might feel pressured in a certain way. We might feel the need to impress someone. So today we're going to look at 3 things that Catholics believe have a major influence on us when making one of these ethical choices between right and wrong. And the first one we're going to look at is something called natural law. St. Thomas Aquinas, a theologian, a religious teacher and thinker of the 13th century, talked about something called eternal law, which is basically the mind of God. And within that eternal law are eternal truths about what is right and wrong. And natural law is what's in us, in humans. So there exists for all eternity, for all time, an eternal law of right and wrong. And how we know that as humans is through our nature, through something called natural law. Natural law is inside each of us. It sets the rules for right and wrong. It is a deep sense of the basic goods. You could call it a deep intuition about what is right and wrong. So there are many things that you know. Maybe you've never been taught it, you just know it. You're intuitive, you've got common sense. You know that this is right, you know that that is wrong. And that Catholics point to and say that is your natural law. That's because within you there is a natural set of rules. We sense it within ourselves. We don't always need to be told, we just know the good. Things can get in the way of us knowing good, our selfishness, other people's opinions. Yes, they can get in the way of us knowing the good and the right, but that doesn't mean that it's not still there. It is there in our nature. For example, were you ever told that murder is wrong? Likely, no. You just knew it. And importantly, something is not right or wrong because I decide it, because you decide it. Something is right and wrong because it's written in our nature. That natural law says whether we all disagree or not, there is something that goes deeper than opinion. There is some things which are just right or wrong, no matter what people think. The natural law stays constant. These things will always be right, these things will always be wrong. So ultimately, natural law is God's law, but written in our human nature, like his stamp on our soul. This is good, this is not good. And the most basic of these laws that's written in our human nature is this: do good, avoid evil. Natural law is connected to state laws, laws that governments make. They often form laws based on the natural law. But now and again, governments and states will go against what is the natural law. Think to World War II, all the laws that were imposed upon the Jewish people. That was a law given by a government. So sometimes laws given by a government and by a state can actually contradict what we know is right and wrong. So Catholics on the whole would say that natural law is really primary. We have to follow laws of the state, of course, but really, if it's in conflict with natural law, ideally you follow the natural law, because that's what's good. That is the mind of God. So it flows like this. There is eternal law, the mind of God, and the mind of God can be known in natural law, in our nature, and that natural law is often expressed in the laws of a state, of a government. Eternal law, natural law, state law. So we are influenced in our ethical decisions because of this thing that exists in our nature, a natural law that influences our decisions. So the second thing we're looking at today that has a major impact on our ethical decisions is conscience. Conscience is like an internal compass, but instead of leading us north, south, east or west, this compass leads us to do good. So when we are faced with an ethical decision, should I choose between right or wrong, we often go with what our conscience dictates, says. And when we go against our conscience, we often feel that guilt. We knew that that was the wrong decision, but we did it anyway. But the conscience doesn't decide what is right and wrong. It just points us to it. It's like a torch that shines a light on this is good, this is wrong. As if good and bad, right and wrong are written on a wall, and the conscience, like the torch, helps us to know this is what you should be choosing right now. So Catholics are encouraged to follow their conscience, and in fact, if they are taught something and it goes against their conscience, they are encouraged to follow their conscience. But importantly, the conscience isn't alone. So you might have had an experience where once in your life you thought in your heart, in your conscience, that that one particular thing was right, that gossiping was right. But then perhaps you learn that the person you gossiped about has been really hurt by this, and all of a sudden you start to feel in your conscience, actually gossiping is wrong. Your conscience has been informed. We educate our conscience, we educate it through discussion, through learning, through thinking about consequences, through our own thinking and reasoning. All of these things educate our conscience. And finally, the third thing we're looking at today that influences how we make an ethical choice is something called virtue. The virtues are good habits that we build up over time. They are personal qualities and characteristics that we have. For example, kindness, patience, love, carefulness, humility, fairness. All these things are virtues. But importantly, they are not just things that someone has. Someone isn't just kind, they have to work at it. If I practice little actions of patience every day, one day when I have to be really patient, when the big challenge comes, I've got this virtue so great in my life because I've practiced it, that the virtue helps me, my practice helps me with making that ethical choice. Virtues are a choice. I am going to choose to be kind. I'm going to choose the good. And the more we do that, the small little steps, the little actions build up to us having a virtue of kindness. So a virtue impacts our decision making because the greater the virtue is in our life, the greater amount of patience I have in my life, the greater amount of love I have in my life, the more likely we are going to be influenced by it. The bigger the virtue, the greater the influence. There you have it, 3 things that influence how we make an ethical choice. The natural law, conscience, and virtues. And importantly, all of those things we don't need someone else to help us with. We don't need someone else to tell us about conscience or natural law or virtue. These are all things which we can do ourselves that can help us to make the correct ethical choice. So the question comes, well, why do you need the Bible then, or the church to tell you what is right or wrong? Because it's difficult to choose between right and wrong sometimes. We are often led down the wrong path. And having the support of a church community, having the guidance of the Bible can help us in knowing the good, in choosing the right path, in our personal and ethical decision making.